This is the story of a coral reef in the Red Sea. The reef is a luxurious, colourful underwater paradise inhabited by a multitude of creatures. But it was not always that peaceful. In 1940, during World War II, a ship goes down near the coast of Sudan, the Umbria. All of a sudden, the realm of marine creatures is overshadowed by a steel titan bristling with weapons. 6 decades later, nature has regained its territory and more. Today, the ship's outlines can only be vaguely guessed at. Magically, the Umbria has changed from wreck to reef. "470 feet long and 55 feet wide, the Umbria started life with the Hamburg America line carrying 2,400 passengers. In 1935, she is sold to Italy. Her new role is to carry troops to and from the Italian colonies in East Africa. On June the 9th, 1940, a British gunboat escorts the Umbria to Wingate Reef near Port Sudan and forces her to anchor. In the small hours of June the 10th, 1940, Captain Lorenzo Muisan is informed of Italy's decision to enter the war. He gives the command to scuttle his ship. Under the guise of an abandoned ship rescue maneuver, Muisan gets his men off the vessel. At the same time, he has the portholes opened. By the time the British realize they have been tricked, it is too late. Very quickly, the Umbria begins to sink. The crew have prevented the ship from falling into enemy hands. Her davits, protruding from the waves, is all that remains visible of the Umbria today. The lowest point of the wreck rests 40 meters below the surface. No hostile party was to have the ship. As it sank, no one could have imagined that one day the locals would take possession. And yet today, the wreck is home to an enormous diversity of creatures. First came the sponges, corals, and anemones. Then followed the fishes of the reef. Morays usually inhabit natural crevices in a reef, but for this giant moray, the hollows in this artificial structure are just as good. During daylight, morays stay concealed. Only at dusk do they leave their lairs to hunt. Most morays feed on smaller fishes. There are plenty of opportunities around the wreck. The moray tries to save energy when hunting. It simply lies in wait for a passing meal. is also abundant life inside the Umbria. Her walls are covered with crimson and pink sponges. Even loose cables are coveted real estate. In the ghostly void of what was once the restaurant, fish are now resting. The once polished surfaces of sinks and toilets are lined with sponges and sediment. Slender sweepers and swarms of fry seek the safety of numerous recesses. Deep inside the ship, other treasures are hidden. Somewhere in there, 50,000 silver coins may still be concealed. The holds reveal why the captain scuttled his ship. They were fully loaded with war material for the Italian troops in East Africa. On her last journey, the Umbria carried 360,000 bombs weighing 6,000 tons and 60 crates of explosives. Other holds contain detonators and bottles. Even these have now become home to living creatures. Tube worms and bright red sponges have given the smooth surfaces an exotic decor. The darker the interior gets, the fewer fish venture inside. Sediment-covered iron stairs lead several decks down into the hull. One deck down, 3 Fiat 1100 Lunga from the 30s are still parked side by side. Time and salt have gnawed at these luxury limousines. Colonies of tube worms are encrusting the cars like roots of strange plants, but unlike plants, they can live in the dark. The constant darkness of these artificial cavities deters most life. Deep down, the wreck feels as eerie as a grave. The engine room has become the domain of tube worms and sponges. The deeper down, the more frequent they get. A gigantic connecting rod traverses the twilight of the engine room. On it and on the engineer's workbench, sediment has gently settled like snow. Wherever sunlight penetrates, fish feel at home. One of the top floor cabins has been claimed by a lionfish. With their long, pointed fin rays, clear-fin lionfish are among the most bizarre creatures of the reef. The name of this one is clearly an understatement. The common lionfish is the most flamboyant of its family. Almost 20 inches long, with its flashy tentacles above the eyes, its gaudy stripes and long fin rays, it is designed to impress. Lionfish can well afford to show off their glamour. They have no reason to hide. They are painfully poisonous and fear no enemy. At dusk, these prima donnas of the reef turn into deadly hunters. Their hunting weapon, however, is not poison, but a sinister combination of patience and speed. When a victim is marked out, it is first slowly cornered, then attacked with explosive speed. Death strikes in just a millisecond. After the kill, the lionfish is all tranquility. Now the speed killer takes his time to digest. No less bizarre in its appearance is the sargassum anglerfish. Enjoying bright sunlight, it is often seen among the Umbria's davits as it drifts near the surface among the seaweed. With its peculiar body shape and its many buds and flaps of skin, the anglerfish melts perfectly into this floating mini jungle. Its hand-like pectoral fins are useful for crawling around in the weeds. Goose barnacles have anchored themselves to the seaweed. They often cling to flotsam, filtering plankton from the water. From the davits at the surface to the Umbria's anchor that lies on the sea floor 120 feet below, the wreck has transformed into a complex coral reef, all within 60 years. Of all the Earth's marine habitats, coral reefs boast the greatest diversity. In these warm waters, the temperature never sinks below 20 degrees centigrade. The reef offers safety and plenty of food. Coral reefs are the jungles of the sea in more senses than one. They produce more oxygen than all the rainforests of the Earth. Connected to the Mediterranean only by the Suez Canal, the Red Sea is really an extension of the Indian Ocean. It separates Africa from Asia. Its connection to the Indian Ocean is the 16-mile-wide Strait of Bab al-Mandab. Because of this relative isolation and its desert environment, the Red Sea is warmer than the Indian Ocean. So, coral reefs can grow here, north of the tropics. Because of this isolation, between 20 and 30% of all the species living here are found nowhere else on Earth. One of them is the masked butterfly fish. This is a close relative, the striped butterfly fish. Great swarms of Red Sea bannerfish often glide through the coral gardens. The orchid dottyback is as long as a man's finger, a dwarf among the Red Sea perches. Among the surgeonfishes, too, there are some which only exist in the Red Sea. The yellow-tailed tang keeps the reefscape free of algae. This orange anemone fish is only found in the Red Sea. It has chosen a bottle anemone for a home. Anemone fish are strictly territorial. Some live in pairs, others in large family groups, always staying in their own territory. They live for and off their host. When danger threatens, the fish seek shelter between the anemone's tentacles. The aptly named magnificent sea anemone can grow to 3 feet in diameter. Its wide foot is securely anchored on a solid foundation. The tentacles are used to catch prey. They are sticky and dotted with poisonous nettles that are dangerous to most fish. The bodies of most fish are covered in a film of slime to protect their skins. The anemone fish's slimy body glove is immunized against certain anemone species. To some fish, anemone tentacles are a delicacy, but the clownfish carefully guard their home and drive away anyone who might cause damage. The anemone fish live under female rule. Each female keeps a harem of males. The more anemones in an area, the larger the family of fish. In their territory, the anemone fish only tolerate juvenile three-spot damsels, who also use the anemone for shelter. The great variety on the reef is by no means limited to fish. The variety of sponges is just as great. Sponges are pioneers, the very first to invade new space. They have conquered the Earth's oceans from the shallows to the deep sea. Today, there is hardly a spot left on the Umbria that is not covered by brightly colored sponges. After the sponges, soft corals are next in line to colonize. Anemones and corals both belong to the same ancient group of marine animals that have inhabited the oceans for 600 million years. Some corals have a secret to their success. They have teamed up with algae. With their delicate, translucent bodies, soft corals are among the most beautiful creatures of the reef. Those corals who do not live in partnership with algae completely depend on what food they can filter from the current. These imposing structures are also corals. With a span of 6 feet and more, the Red Sea giant sea fan is one of the largest coral species. Red Sea pteria have settled on their fans to profit from the strategic position of their host. Sea whips, too, prefer strong currents. Even the so-called black corals are found on the Umbria's wreck. They are sought after by jewelers and have been plundered throughout the entire Indo-Pacific region. The actual architects of the reef, however, are the stony corals. They all live in partnership with single-celled organisms which help them produce limestone. Honeycomb corals play an important role in the building of a reef. The grey turbinaria forms large warped plates. Some staghorn corals are small and finger-shaped, others grow into huge tables. Brain corals, with their characteristic meanders, compete for space with their neighbors. Some sprawl horizontally on the sea floor, while others grow into spheres of 1 meter in diameter. The Umbria is inhabited by a multitude of different coral species, each finding its special niche in the competition for space and light. When corals mate, myriads of tiny medusae are set adrift in the current. Those that can't find a solid base where they can attach themselves are carried away by the drift, or end as food for plankton eaters. A wreck is a welcome place to settle down. Such impressive sculptures are the work of myriads of tiny animals, the coral polyps. Each individual polyp consists of a bag-like body and a ring of tentacles around its mouth. The bulk of the reef is built of the secretions of polyps. Each polyp grows a cup-shaped limestone skeleton tube around its soft body. Every new generation continues to build on the skeletons of the previous one, making the reef grow an inch or so per year. The actual living tissue is only a thin layer, but it turns the reef into a wall of voracious mouths. Like all animals, coral polyps produce gases as they digest their food. Those gases can be seen rising to the surface in tiny bubbles. Such colossal coral formations are full of hiding places for legions of creatures. Some of them are colossal themselves, such as the common reef octopus. It hardly ever ventures to the open water, preferring the security of the reef. The intelligence of these creatures is legendary. They are also transformers. Within mere milliseconds, an octopus can change its appearance to perfectly mimic its surroundings. Octopuses are phenomenal contortionists. They can fold up their body to fit into any crevice in the reef. Among the corals, many small animals find living space. Fan worms anchor the tube they live in on coral knolls. Only a feathery wreath of plankton-filtering fans sticks out into the current. On the Umbria, some worms have found ready-made tubes a good alternative to a self-made home. Squamosi giant clams often grow among corals. The beautiful blue color along the edge of its mantle is caused by algae with which the clam lives in partnership. With powerful jaws, a Titan triggerfish breaks off large pieces of coral. The triggerfish share this taste with parrotfish. Their teeth form a sort of beak that enables them to scrape off the coral's surface. Some triggerfish have long, pointed teeth. With these jaws, they can break off entire coral branches. But the most devastating coral predator is not a fish. It is the crown-of-thorns starfish. Half a meter across, it is bristling with poisonous spines. The crown-of-thorns' favorite food is the polyps of stony corals. The starfish pulls its stomach over a colony and digests all living matter. In a single night, it can destroy the growth of an entire decade. But corals have great regenerating powers, as the Umbria's story proves. In 1949, Hans Haas, the pioneering Austrian oceanographer, documented the beginning of the wreck's metamorphosis into a reef. 9 years after the Umbria sank, he was the first to ignore the official diving ban around Port Sudan. The corals had just begun to invade the hull. 30 years later, Hans Haas returned. For comparison, he filmed the same spots again. The corals had clearly progressed. Another 2 decades later, corals try hard to succeed even near the surface where the wreck is exposed to wave and wind action. Every crack is now occupied by fish. Today, after 60 years, the creatures of the sea have completely conquered the Umbria. The true diversity of life in the wreck only becomes visible after dark, when armies of sea urchins leave their crevices and come out to find food. Hundreds of slate pencil urchins graze on the algae that encrust the ship. Diadem urchins are the most common kind around here. Their foot-long quills are an effective deterrence against invaders. But they peacefully graze alongside relatives with noxious names, poisonous parson's hat urchins and toxic leather sea urchins, whose quills are tipped with white blisters of poison. Sea stars and cleaner shrimp keep the reef free of organic waste. The shrimps are waiting near the cleansing stations where the fish come to get rid of parasites. These crustaceans live in pairs, but sometimes also in groups of up to 100. At night, morays and hermit crabs leave their secret shelters. The anemone carrier uses its guest for camouflage and as a chemical weapon against predators. The crab is sifting through the sands to feed himself and his anemone. Beside them, an entire army of shrimpfish is scanning the bottom for prey. At night, large schools of fish patrol the reef. Darkness offers safety as well as an abundance of food. Night is also the most active period for the corals. In the dark, plankton rises from the bottom to the surface, and the corals spread their tentacles to filter as much nourishment from the water as they can get. During the day, these feather stars quietly rest in the shade. At night, they position themselves at corners exposed to the current. Cuttlefish are scanning the reef for prey. Porcupine fish are out and about while other species, those who can protect themselves, sleep at night. Surgeonfish use their razor-sharp tail fins to stave off attackers in the dark. Parrotfish withdraw into cavities or simply lean against the corals. They cover themselves in a slimy cocoon which cuts off their scent from predators. In the morning, nothing remains but their empty sleeping bags. Plankton is the staple diet of many inhabitants of the reef. When day breaks, myriads of microscopic creatures are still floating near the surface. In the early morning light, they are joined by fleets of common jellyfish. Pulsating like so many hearts of glass, they drift over the Umbria. This living soup also attracts the giants among the plankton eaters. Manta rays can boast a span of more than 6 meters. Like spaceships, they glide through galaxies of plankton clouds. Indian mackerel are sifting through these rich waters. Mouths wide open, they filter the young fish and crustaceans from the living soup. From time to time, the most colossal of all fish visits the Umbria. Whale sharks reach the size of a long cargo truck while living on microscopic prey. Whale sharks never travel alone. Striped remoras are always by their side. Swimming in the giant's wake, they save energy. In turn, they free their host of parasites. Cleaner fish provide an essential service to reef fish, many of whom suffer from skin parasites. Anyone who needs a cleaning just has to open his gills and let them do the work. Systematically, the cleaner fish rids the skin of fungi, bacteria, or fish lice. This is a clear case of a win-win deal. Morays also visit such cleaning stations where small wrasses are waiting for customers. The moray opens its gills and mouth, allowing the cleaner fish complete access. The small fish safely move about between the big predator's jaws. As long as they are doing their job, they have nothing to fear. Such relationships are frequent around the reef. This Steinitz goby lives with a snapping shrimp. The goby guards the mouth of their cave while the blind crustacean keeps the home clean. The two stay in physical contact almost all the time. When danger threatens, the goby disappears into the cave. Several goby species inhabit the sea floor in the lee of the Umbria. Some dig tunnels in the sand, others withdraw into caves for the night and seal the entrance with coral debris. A number of creatures are perfectly adapted to life in the sand. Many successfully conceal their presence. Blue-spotted stingrays like to rest under coral fans. In spite of their flashy colors, there's no need to hide from predators. A poisonous sting near their tail makes them almost invincible. These are close relatives, ribbon-tail stingrays. What looks like a deadly conflict is in fact a mating ritual. Only during the mating season do they gather in such large groups. They normally lead solitary lives. For this female Titan triggerfish, the mating business is already over. She has dug a hollow in the sand and laid her eggs in it. While the female guards the eggs, the male patrols nearby to keep enemies away. Such nests are found all over the Umbria. The orange-striped triggerfish, too, is expecting new offspring. It has found a place for its eggs between corals on the Umbria's upper deck. Now it fans fresh, oxygen-rich water over them. White-bellied damsels are busy taking care of their own eggs. They need smooth surfaces on which to glue their eggs. The wreck still offers several such places. The parents carefully clean the surroundings of algae to protect their eggs against impurities or aggressive fungi. The female glues more eggs to the surface. The male immediately fertilizes them. This pair of damsels, too, is busy laying and fertilizing eggs. They've chosen a steel pipe as their nursery. Their eggs will never hatch. They are a delicacy for other fish. Nevertheless, numerous young fish will reach maturity to fill the Umbria with life. And this wreck is not the only man-made habitat in the Red Sea. Many reefs have grown up to just below the surface, and quite a few ships have run aground. Thousands of freighters pass through the Suez Canal every year. Time and again, some Red Sea reef stops the steel giants in their path, forever. Such an impact can destroy large reef areas, but in the long run, the wrecks offer new space for corals, and the corals bring back the fish. Navigation errors and reef traps have turned the Red Sea into a gigantic graveyard for ships. In 1991, the Salem Express ferry ran into a reef near the coast of Egypt. It is a comparatively young wreck, barely encrusted and eerie in its lifeless smoothness. The Blue Bell has been down for 2 decades. She holds a complete load of motor vehicles. Vans, lorries and four-wheel drives are stuck in the sand. The vehicles may not be well, but they're very much alive. Stony corals began to colonize long ago. They even grow on rubber tires. Brightly colored soft corals flourish on the rubber. The cargo of some of the ships has turned the seabed into a bizarre stage. Some 20 years ago, the Greek freighter Yanis D sank in the northern Red Sea. Here, the current seems very favorable. Already, the entire wreck is covered in all kinds of corals. Near the Yanis D lies the wreck of the British freighter Thistlegorm. Sunk by the Germans in World War II, it has now become an underwater siding for several railroad cars. The architecture in this submarine landscape doesn't just consist of ill-fated ships. This mushroom structure near Saab Rumi, a few miles north of the Umbria, is all that's left of an underwater research station. Here, back in 1963, oceanographer Jacques Cousteau explored the effects of the submarine environment on humans. 8 men spent an entire month at a depth of 12 meters. They explored the environment, made films, and performed medical tests. After the experiment was over, the living quarters were disassembled, but shark cages, an underwater shed, and the hangar for the deep diving vehicle remained. 4 decades later, the structures are encrusted with corals and inhabited by fish. Now, as then, the Saab Rumi Reef is a shark's paradise. Today, small fish use the shark cages the same way the humans did. A giant squirrelfish feels secure behind steel bars. But the cage is the territory of a giant grouper. More and more grey reef sharks congregate around the cage. The grouper, however, is too big for the hungry pack. The mood is getting nasty. Finally, one gets a bite. And won't let go. The victor escapes with his prize, and soon the sharks calm down again. The striped remora can now return to their positions. Their dorsal fin has been transformed into a sucking plate, giving the blind passenger a good grip on the shark's skin. Neither the remora nor the pilot jacks that always accompany the oceanic white-tip shark run a great risk. Although sharks do eat jacks, these companions are left in peace. Sharks often mix with blackfin barracudas. During the day, these elegant swimmers move in tight schools. They can often be seen circling above the Umbria. Common crocodile fish are not exactly high flyers. With an air bladder that has atrophied, they tend to stay on the bottom. After a brief excursion, the crocodile fish again descends on the wreck. Species that live on the bottom are usually masters of camouflage. Background colors and structures are chosen with great care. Crocodile fish are ambush hunters. They will devour anything that passes by and is of the right size. If the true champions of hide-and-seek ever blow their cover, it is usually too late. To small fish, the wreck is a dangerous zone. Behind any dark corner, a scorpion fish might be lying in wait. All it needs to do is to wait for an unsuspecting passerby. Like a powerful vacuum cleaner, the scorpion fish sucks in its victim. The Umbria attracts predatory fish of all sorts, for corals draw in enormous swarms of small fish. Jewel fairy basslets inhabit the reef in large groups led by a male. If the leading male dies, the highest-ranking female grows an elongated dorsal fin and turns male. Like many other fish, the jewel fairy basslets have found a new habitat in and around the Umbria. The wreck is teeming with juveniles. The blue-green pullers have greatly multiplied. The Red Sea anemone fish are reproducing too. Throngs of tiny young fish are jostling through the wreck. Older juveniles mix with schools of slender sweepers hiding in the corridors and corners of the Umbria. They all profit from the protection of the man-made reef. Life is hovering in engine rooms and cargo holds, and drifting through corridors and cabins. Scores of marine creatures have invaded the Umbria. 6 decades after her final journey, she has lost her threat. The Umbria has changed from a deadly man-o'-war to a teeming reef of life.